What can October 2020 tell us about October 2021? That's going to be the topic of today's video. Okay everyone, so if you're an expat or a high net wealth individual in particular, go over to adamfire.com and see how I can help you. Now, I know it seems like such a long time ago, but let's think back to October of last year. So basically the pandemic had started, well technically it started in 2019, but people hadn't heard about it until Wuhan locked down in January last year. And of course the panic really started in late February and March last year. Then things were getting better during the summer, but then COVID was getting worse again during October. And in addition to that, people were really worried about the US election, just as they were in 2016. But they were worried for a different reason. They were worried that there could be a disputed US election and the result would kind of go to the High Court, not the High Court, sorry, the Supreme Court in the US and so on and so forth. And what's interesting is the US stock market had a very bad October, relatively speaking to the rest of the year. And people were very pessimistic going into November last year. Then what happened? Well, the US election was a disputed US election. In fact, it was worse than expected. And in addition to that, many people forget this now, but many European countries went into a second lockdown at exactly the same time that the US election was disputed. Yet despite that, US stock markets once again performed very well in the days after that, even on the morning after that. They soared, in fact, just like they did in 2016, which was completely against what the media predicted. So the news was doom and gloom, but actually the stock prices did very well. And then of course, I think it was 10 days later or whatever, then the vaccine was announced and markets went up further again. So there was two big bounces, once before the vaccine announcement and once after. One of the bounces was maybe expected, but one was completely unexpected, at least from the media. Although, as I've often said on this channel, you can never predict these things. But the point is, stock markets can sometimes perform very well during the least expected periods. 2018 is another example of that. People forget that the US stock markets in particular, but also global stock markets, went down about 25% quite quickly in 2018, early 2019. So they hit a record high a few months before that in 2018, but then they fell. People are feeling very pessimistic going into 2019, but then the markets did very, very well indeed, including during a US government shutdown. But this leads me then to the news of the moment about the debt ceiling, government shutdowns and so on. As I said, during that period, historically markets have actually done pretty well during shutdowns and so on. That doesn't mean they're doing well because of the shutdown, but in spite of the shutdown. So I'm not predicting the markets are going to do well in October or November. Nobody knows for sure. But what I do know is the news out there is no indication of what's going to happen. How can I help you? In two ways. First of all, are you an expat, a high net wealth individual, or just somebody who lives in a part of the world where it's difficult to get access to quality investment solutions? In which case, go onto my website on adamfire.com and find out more. If you don't fit into any of those categories, then in which case there's a range of free material on my website, on this YouTube channel, and indeed on my Quora, where I get over 200 or have received over 231 million views in the last few years. And finally, if you want to actually read my thoughts in more detail, go onto Amazon and find my book on there.